South Korea said it's absurd that two parties with a history of launching wars of invasion, the Korean War and the war in Ukraine, are now vowing mutual military cooperation on the premise of a preemptive attack by the international community that will never happen. Okay, let's just dive into the Ukraine war news with the three big stories for today. So I saw this and I thought, we're doing it again. U.S. and German officials have proposed that the alliance pledge, now who's doing this? U.S. and German officials have proposed that the alliance pledge that Ukraine has a bridge to NATO membership rather than a, quote, irreversible path, which is what Stoltenberg said not too long ago, with the latter being preferred by the UK and several Eastern and Central European nations. So let's go to the original article. It's the US and German officials that have proposed that they talk about this bridge. The United States and several key allies are actively debating how strongly to commit to Ukraine's NATO membership at the alliance's 75th anniversary summit coming up in July, with the U.S. facing criticism from a variety of European countries for not being willing to go as far as several, especially those that are closest to the Russian border, would like. Now, those closest to the Russian border know the score, and they want to, like, the irreversible path. We're there. We're right. Now, this is a harbinger of days gone by, too, right? Let's just look at the path. What's happened with NATO over time. So there was a dialogue in 1991 and 1994, and cooperation started with newly independent Ukraine, joined the North Atlantic Cooperation Council 1991, then the Partnership for Peace Program 1994, then 1997, Charter established the NATO-Ukraine Commission as a body responsible for developing a NATO-Ukraine relationship. Like, what will this look like? And then we got to 2008. In the 2008 Bucharest summit, that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. And this is when Vladimir Putin turned and said, I'm done with the West, and decided he's going to invade Ukraine. It was only a matter of time. So in 2009, the annual national program was introduced as Ukraine's key instrument to advance its Euro-Atlantic integration. But somewhere between 2008 and 2014, 2008, 9, 10, it was the Germans and the French that really opposed Ukraine joining NATO. And that was a very, very bad thing to happen. From 2010 to 2014, Ukraine pursued a non-alignment policy. Of course, that fell apart in 2014 when they were invaded. Okay, so we're going down the same kind of path again. Instead of full-throatedly saying, we are supporting Ukraine, Ukraine will be NATO, they're saying, well, we don't know exactly what we're going to say. The eventual language issued by the alliance about Ukraine during its July summit in Washington is critical. At the summit, we'll be taking concrete steps to bring Ukraine closer to NATO. That's not the same thing as an irreversible path. And ensure that there is a bridge to membership, a bridge that's strong and well lit, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said. Now, he's saying something diplomatically, saying something without saying something, but the Russians are reading that as well, right? A senior U.S. official said that Biden administration officials do not think the word irreversible would get the support of the entire alliance, pointing in particular to Hungary as a likely holdout. But I think the U.S. and Germany are those that don't want that to be irreversible. Most Central European countries are disappointed by the Biden administration's ambiguity and procrastination when it comes to outlining a concrete pathway forward for Ukraine, a Central European diplomat told CNN. A second European official, whose country is more aggressive on Ukraine's membership than the U.S., said that European allies have been directly lobbying the White House to make Ukraine's pathway as clear as possible. So it's the same song, second verse, and it's really unfortunate because we just don't know exactly where we stand. The best analogy I can give is this. If you've ever been like at church or at a concert or something, and the guy singing the song, trying to lead you in the song, doesn't actually know the song fully, it's really hard to sing along with him when he doesn't know where he's leading you. And that's kind of where we are right now as we're trying to bring Ukraine into NATO, or a path to NATO, or irreversible, or a bridge to, or we're just not sure what we're doing. Now, Putin was in North Korea over the last couple of days, and he was welcomed, the red carpet, the whole nine yards, and he walked away with a deal that if either country is attacked, the other will support the one that is attacked. That's what came out of that North Korea deal. Okay, now, South Korea is not happy about this. And South Korea said it's absurd that two parties with a history of launching wars of invasion, the Korean War and the war in Ukraine, are now vowing mutual military cooperation on the premise of a preemptive attack by the international community that will never happen, the Office of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said. It's true, but they have this defensive alliance now because, hey, if either of us is attacked by the West, then we'll come to each other's aid. In response to Moscow-Pyongyang Security Pact, which Seoul views as a violation of UN sanctions, South Korea is considering supplying weapons to Ukraine. Ha! How about that? Now, this is a big deal because South Koreans, let me show you an article from a year ago. South Korea, this is in The Economist, South Korea still refuses to send arms to Ukraine. And that's because they have this thing in their culture, we're not going to send arms to active combatants, but they were sending things like South Korea has supplied non-lethal aid, including gas masks and medical supplies and things along those lines, right? So this is as of a year ago. But all bets are off, it looks like, now that North Korea is involved. On 20 June, South Korea has strongly condemned the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement signed by the leaders of Russia and North Korea this week, stating that it violates United Nations sanctions. In response, South Korea said it will review the possibility of supplying weapons to Ukraine. It's just crazy. It was an unforced error on the side of Putin to be doing that, but there you are. So you got some weapons from North Korea, but now it may very well be counterbalanced by South Korea. South Korea, a key U.S. ally, has so far provided humanitarian aid and other non-lethal support to Ukraine while joining the international sanctions against Russia over its invasion. But it has refrained from directly providing arms to Ukraine, citing a policy of not supplying weapons to active conflict zones. But that's going to change. Now, after the trip to North Korea, Putin went to Vietnam amid increasing Russian isolation over Ukraine. Putin met with Vietnamese President Tu Lam in Hanoi to reaffirm the Kremlin's ties to its longtime ally Vietnam in a bid to boost trade. Putin's visit to Vietnam is widely seen as aimed at sending a signal that Russia still has friends in the region. Lam congratulated Vietnam's comrade for Putin's re-election. Well, his re-election was kind of a done deal. He spent $2 billion on his re-election, and not only that, it was already rigged. While Putin said that one of Russia's priorities was to strengthen ties with the Southeast Asian nation. Putin and Lam inked several agreements to bolster economic cooperation between the two countries, and so they did get some of that. And to see the difference in this, compared to what happened in North Korea as opposed to what's happening in Vietnam, think about this. Russia's GDP, gross domestic product, is $2.24 trillion. Vietnam's is $408 billion. Now that's a pretty significant difference, but South Korea's is only 48.3 billion, about 9 times smaller than Vietnam. So it's something with Vietnam, not a lot with North Korea as far as what they can do for each other. But Vietnam is a manufacturing powerhouse. It's hosted President Joe Biden last September in a trip touted as part of the arc of progress between the former enemies. Russia is Vietnam's biggest supplier of weapons. Okay, and while that was going on, a delegation of American congressmen led by Representative McCall were kind of poking China in the eye by meeting with the Dalai Lama. So the Americans have been very clear about China. You can't really tell us we can't visit with Taiwan, we can't visit with Tibet, and those kind of things. And China's not going to like this one bit. Okay, last little bit here. We're talking about NATO. No one has done more to promote NATO in Ukraine than Russia. And if you think I'm kidding, look at the statistics here. October 2013, before the invasion of Crimea and Donbass, Ukrainians against NATO, 66%. Ukrainians for NATO, 20%. After the Russian occupation of Crimea and Donbass in 2014, 25% were against and 51 were in support of Ukraine in NATO. And then by August 2021, that's still about 6 months out before the actual 7 months out before the actual invasion, it was 35 against and 54% for. But after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in January of 2023, only 3% of the country were against joining NATO. 86% were in favor of it. No one has been a greater salesman for NATO than President Putin. Okay, that's all that I have to say. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.